Well, hello there, and welcome to the Ministry Connection live Hangout on air. This is one portion of what we do as the Ministry Connection, a weekly podcast to help build community and facilitate discussion among independent Baptist ministry leaders. That's what we're all about. And tonight we're going to go live. We're live streaming right now, and you can watch, you can tweet, you can even at some point in time here join the conversation. But for now, we're going to kind of let those who are joining me tonight introduce themselves, and then we'll just get started with some conversation. We've got some great topics on hand, and we're looking forward to getting into those tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Josh Teis. Josh, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let everybody know who you are, where you're at, how they can connect with you, and things like that. And just let us know who Josh Teis is.
Yeah, I'm Josh Teis. I'm the pastor over at Southern Hills Baptist Church in Las Vegas, Nevada. We started this church, Heather and I, about 10 years ago, and have been here ever since. You can connect with me at Josh Teis on Twitter and Joshua Teis on Facebook.
All right, Ryan. Ryan Hayden's with us. Ryan, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let everybody know a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Hayden. I'm the pastor of Bible Baptist Church in Mattoon, Illinois. You can find me at pastorryanhayden.com or biblebaptistmattoon.org or on Twitter at Ryan Hayden.
Well, guys, thanks for joining us. We've got Matt Lyon, who is supposed to join us tonight, but having a few technical difficulties, so I'm trying to work on getting him in here a little bit also. But at the same time, I am tweeting out right now, letting everybody know that we are live. We're good to go. And if you want to participate in the conversation, one way you can do that is you can live tweet this with the hashtag Ministry Connection. And if you tweeted that, I'm going to keep up with that through the night, and I'm going to be sharing some comments if they come in, and questions if they come in, and kind of interacting with you a little bit that way. So use the hashtag Ministry Connection. If you are over at ministryconnectionpodcast.com/live, underneath there, you've got the whole stream of the hashtag Ministry Connection there. And if you click on the section there to tweet, it'll automatically populate that hashtag. And so all you'll do is tweet what you want to say if you're on that page. And also here in a little bit, we're going to be inviting you in potentially here to share a question or a comment that you've got if you want to share some thoughts of your own. We'll probably try to keep those brief since there's several of us in the conversation already. But you can do that over at ministryconnectionpodcast.com/live on the page. Right under this video, if you're there, there is a button that says Join the Hangout. If you click on that button, it's just going to take you over to the actual event page. And from there, if you type in that little box that says Say Something, if you type that you'd like to join the conversation, that's enough to let me know to invite you in. And that's all it takes. Click the button, join the Hangout, type and say something. I want to join the Hangout, and I can send you an invitation. So we are going to get to that here shortly. So we're going to kick things off tonight with a discussion on this subject. I've had this conversation with a few friends of mine from time to time, and it's the way I'm going to kind of word it is I think there kind of exists this unspoken or this unwritten, litmus test for independent Baptists, like what makes you a real independent Baptist, and so there's like these categories, like this, almost like this checklist, this litmus test that you look for. And you observe in somebody, and if they say they believe this, or if we're going to cover a lot of things, if they look a certain way, or whatever the case is, where they went to school, different things like that. I think sometimes if we're not careful, we've got this litmus test we put guys through as to whether we're going to fellowship with them or not, or whether we're going to consider them a ministry friend or not. And sometimes I think if we're not careful, we're going to add to the standard of fellowship that God has lined out in the Scripture of who we consider brothers and who we can minister with. So that's kind of the subject we're going to get going with. And let me start off by asking this. I'm gonna throw it to Ryan here first. But Ryan, can you just spend some time with your wealth and depth of wisdom and and talk to us, like, what is ecclesiastical separation?
Ecclesiastical separation.
Yes.
Okay. Ecclesiastical separation is it is the scriptural command that we have as individuals and as churches to separate from those that are not of the faith and those that are teaching and preaching false doctrine. It was kind of the watershed of the fundamentalist movement in like the 1920s, 1930s, and basically that's what separated us from mainstream, Protestantism, mainstream Christianity, and then in the 1960s, further from 1950s and 1960s, further from mainline evangelicals, which they also practiced a form of ecclesiastical separation at a point. So
should we practice it today? Should we be practicing ecclesiastical separation?
Absolutely, it's a biblical command. Of course we should. Earnestly contend for the faith.
Right.
Mark those that cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine you've learned and avoid them. Yeah, absolutely.
You agree, Josh?
I think at some level, everybody practices ecclesiastical separation, or everybody that would be of a true faith would practice ecclesiastical separation, marking those which cause division among you and avoiding them. The question would be then, at what lines do you draw so that you can effectively separate from everyone that doesn't believe precisely like you? That's why I would call myself a historic fundamentalist. I don't have close relations with those who do not believe the fundamentals of the faith. The question then becomes, what is fundamental to you versus what is fundamental to me?
Yeah. So we're going to set this from the very beginning. Every single one of us absolutely believes in practicing ecclesiastical separation, that there is a church that is pure, that is faithfully committed to Jesus Christ, to the fundamental doctrines of our faith, and that if there are churches and men that are leading churches that are leading them in a direction away from the pure doctrine delivered to us, then we believe that we have to draw a line. We believe in drawing lines of separation when it comes to key cornerstone doctrines that are just essential to be really a true Christian. And but we're going to talk about, from our faith perspective, our background as independent Baptists, over time, are there things that we've added to that list that we need to consider? And are there things that we have on that list that should never go away and that should stay firmly planted right on that list of things that we should look for, and who we fellowship with and who we consider partnering with in ministry endeavors? When I think about that, I think of sister churches and missionaries and church planners and things like that. So who wants to throw out a first one?
Yeah.
Who's ringing?
I'm sorry, that's me. That was my mom. She was calling.
Oh, hi, Mom.
Yeah. She wanted to let me know what the first one to separate about was.
She's watching live. Hi. No.
If anybody's watching me live, it's my mother. My mother does it all the time. When it comes to things that people look, I'm from the position that I'm an individual who separate over the fundamentals of the faith. Somebody who is not a believer in the blood atonement, somebody who is not a believer in salvation by grace through faith alone, the inerrancy of Scripture. This is a matter of separation for me. And I know that people might be thinking, well, of course, I mean, that's the bottom line, right? That's foundational.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look here. I think we kind of created a list. So, like, when you consider fellowshipping with somebody, let's start off with something that maybe I consider a minor. You've got a pastor who is fine with using canned music or percussion, and one who is not okay with that.
I would separate from them immediately.
Oh, yeah, right.
I'm just kidding.
So for real, like, Like, is that one that exists that people really draw a line in the sand over that?
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of people that would draw a line in the sand over that.
Well, what do you think about that?
I think it's silly, personally. You know, whatever. Um, if you wanna go through the Bible and try to, I mean, I know people have tried to go through the Bible and make a biblical argument for against percussion, like Frank Garlock, or whatever. But I think there's so much speculation there, and it's such a weak argument. Um, I the way I see it, and I think we'll end up coming back to this, is I think um, if we're going to separate, we need to separate over things that are sure in the Bible, and not over things that are speculative, fringe, issues.
Yeah.
That good men that love God and love the Bible and believe in the inerrancy of Scripture and are trying to interpret it correctly come to varying different interpretations of. And music is a big one. I think lots of people that love God, maybe more than me, have completely different standards for music. So,
Yeah. Is there a line that you can cross that takes it too far, in your opinion, guys?
When it comes to music, or when it comes to separation from
Yeah,
somebody
music. I'm specifically music.
I think there's a difference between saying there's a line that somebody should not cross when it comes to music, than saying there's a line that you crossed when it comes to music, therefore I can no longer be your friend. That's a completely different situation. Of course, there are lines that every church needs to make sure that they are not crossing, that they feel that God does not want them to cross, or what might be unbiblical. But to take the position that I'm no longer going to have fellowship with you because of the style of music that you have, I would say that would be an extra biblical decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're out there and you've got thoughts, what I want you to do is tweet with the hashtag Ministry Connection, and I'm keeping up with that right now. If you've got thoughts on anything we're talking about, tweet it, hashtag it Ministry Connection, and I'll share it. So this has nothing to do with our conversation, but Pastor Mark Ward from here in Indiana, he says, great to listen to at Josh Teis and at Ryan Hayden. He's on Twitter there, and at Pastor Reese on hashtag Ministry Connection. So he's using it. So if you want to tweet as well, go over and do that, and I'll share some of your thoughts as well. So, music, I think we covered that. What about, like, there was a time where I used to always wear a coat, a shirt, and tie when I was in the pulpit. And it's something that I have, when I was pastoring, I had a hard time. I almost felt uncomfortable anytime I took my tie off or didn't wear one. But it's something that I've come away from a little bit. Do you think that some people have that standard too, that if your attire in the pulpit determines whether or not you are on the slippery slope headed away from them being able to fellowship with you or not?
There's definitely people like that. We know there's people like that. I think both me and Josh would probably disagree with that, right, Josh? I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but
I don't disagree with that there are people like that.
No.
I think there are individuals who that's a major issue for, and I respect that. I understand that. I think that is something that everybody has to grapple with and decide for their church what they need to do. But whether or not that's a matter of separation, I haven't seen that. For example, this last Sunday I wore a suit and a tie when I preached. It's not something that I do every week. There are other times that I wear a multitude of different things. Never yet worn a tunic. I'm not that traditional. Considered it. But I've not had in my circles individuals that have had to separate from me because of that. There's not been a matter of separation, and Ryan, you may have experienced this. It's the word direction. So what is often said is, it's not that what you're doing is wrong, it's the direction you're headed. So once you take off the tie, that indicates a direction. Once you add a different instrument, that indicates a direction. And that direction on peripheral standards eventually leads to a compromise in doctrine, which could eventually affect a fundamental. And so since you're heading that direction, I may need to preemptive separate from you now so that I might not have to later. So that's what maybe I've seen.
Yeah, I'd say that's the same thing.
Yeah.
Direction.
So, like, what about something? Okay, let's throw out something that maybe is a little more serious, and it's something that's creeping in. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time diving into the actual theology here, but do we draw a line of fellowship over Calvinism and Reformed theology? If somebody that it's not that we don't consider them our brother, but do we feel like we're still on the same page, can co-labor, can support somebody who is making moves toward Calvinism and Reformed theology?
Ryan?
uh, I wouldn't personally. I disagree with that. I think I came from can't talk today. I at one point I considered myself a Calvinist, and I've moved away from that. I actually pastor in a church where the pastor before me was kind of a closet Calvinist, and you know, uh, probably not like a strict 5-pointer, but he was a longtime pastor here, and so I think I could comfortably, if I wanted to, I could comfortably move my church in that direction without very much problem. But that's not what I believe. I'm not a Calvinist, but I have good friends that are. I mean, I've got some really good friends that love God. There's this guy that most people have never heard of. His name is David Dickerson. He pastors down in Sonoya, Georgia. It's got a little camp or a little college, Georgia Baptist College, and I used to run a Christian camp, and they would use the camp every year. And him and the people associated with them, they're all Calvinist, and they were some of the most godly people that I've ever met in my entire life. And I, you know, I think if we're counting crowns in heaven, I think those people probably would end up with more than me. And no, I'm not going to separate over Calvinism. And historically, I don't think it's something that I don't think it's historically something that fundamentalists separated over anyways. I mean, you look back at the early history of fundamentalism, and there were several Calvinist, prominent Calvinist shields up in Toronto and different people. So that's not me.
Yeah. Is it something where you think like maybe you should inquire, because let's be honest, there's like 6 million shades of Calvinism, and like there are guys I know that really, once you dive down, they're really, it's just a matter of semantics. It's terminology that when you dive down and you actually question deeper, there are many times where the things that when they actually explain what they believe, it isn't much different. It's just the terms and semantics that kind of.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think what you're saying is very valid. I just had a recent conversation with one of the young men that got saved at our church, and he's studying for ministry. And he said to me, well, what if I was a Calvinist? And I said to him, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, Reformed theology. I said, I know, but what do you mean by Reformed theology? And I said, there are a lot of branches of where that could go. And through a conversation, I understood that really it was a lot of semantics with him.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that we would believe precisely the same thing on. When it comes to matter of separation, to answer your question, a matter of separation over Calvinism, that's a really, I would say no for me personally, but that would be a very difficult thing. I would say to an individual who would say, you must separate over Calvinism, I would also say then you probably would want to stop quoting Spurgeon in the pulpit, because he was clearly a Calvinist. You say, oh, well, he wouldn't say it that way. Well, he clearly did say it that way. So you have to be clear across the board. Who would you separate not just from in 2015, who would you separate from in 2060, or 1960, excuse me, or 1870s? Who would you separate from then? And would you be consistent across the board with that perspective? If you would, then more power to you. But if not, then let's be careful about throwing those lines of separation out there.
I mean, when you talk about Calvinism, even going back into Baptist history, a lot of the early leaders of, Baptists that we can trace back to were clearly Calvinistic.
Sure.
And you can deny that. There are people that will deny that, but there's just no case to be made there. I mean, it's just read anything they wrote, any of their confessions.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's right. I was really getting curious about this as I was seeing a lot of my people who I would consider friends that were, I would say, at least infatuated and enamored with Reformed theology, and I'm like, I'm just not there. And so I was curious about it. And so at one point in time, I traveled down with Mike Rao. I dragged him along with me, and we went down to it was the Louisville area, and went to this Kentucky State Baptist Convention forum that they had on Calvinism, and you had both sides of the debate talking with each other and saying, this is something where, yeah, we're not going to agree, but does that hinder the mission? Because people have always not agreed on this, at least among Baptists historically. They've disagreed on this, but they've said, but we still share the same commission, and we're still going to work together to reach the world for Christ. They still believed in because I really think that most of our friends that get really hot under the collar over Calvinism, the only form of Calvinism that they really consider is what we would consider hyper-Calvinism, right?
Yes, hyper-Calvinism. Exactly.
And so what they don't realize is a lot of Calvinists are evangelistic, probably more evangelistic than some of us, and really are all about, really are just as much about evangelism as we are. It's just their role, their view of the role of the sovereignty of God in salvation. Anyway, we're getting into more of the doctrine than I was thinking we would. But before we move on, first of all, I want to say this. I will separate over somebody if they don't have good coffee. So I'm going to pour myself some more French press coffee. But and I think, Josh, what did you bring up? Florsheim shoes? Is that?
That's correct. These are the style of shoes that need to be worn. Now, sadly, I think I'm wearing some J.C. Penney's today, Clayburns. But
yeah, and now it's the bow tie too. So, how hipster cool you are, that's determines on whether I fellowship with you or not. Now, in all seriousness, Daniel Hart, who's watching, tweeted for us this. He says, define fellowship. Is that having coffee, speaking of coffee, with a pastor, dinner, or joint church events? What do you guys think, when you consider fellowship and whether you should separate ecclesiastically? I think, Ryan, from our conversations, you've realized that there are some people that are not on the same page as you on everything in your community that you have, built relationships with, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, we have I've been trying lately to get to know some people from other churches. We're in a homeschool group, and we don't have a big size Christian school in our area, and so we're homeschooling our kids, and just to get them around some other people. We've gotten to know a lot of different people that go to non-denominational churches, Bible churches in our area, and gotten to know some of the leadership in those churches. And I've had some conversations with them, and I don't know any of them that don't believe in the inerrancy of Scripture, that aren't taking different stands. Maybe not the same stand that I would take, but stands for the gospel. I'm not going to have joint church events with them or invite them to speak in my pulpit, but I definitely consider them to be brothers and sisters in Christ, and enjoy fellowshipping with them from time to time.
Yeah. Okay. And Josh, same thing, probably, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would have personally, I would have a cup of coffee with pretty much anybody in town, and I'm in Vegas, so that's saying something. So there really is, and I know that some would say, "Oh, that's not true," but and it may not be true for some, but I think I would. But when it comes to church-wide events, yeah, there would be a session where to have two churches come together, 3, 4, 5 churches come together. There would have to be an agreement on some core doctrine and core principles. Now, for me, that may not necessarily mean they would only have to be independent Baptists. That would be for our church. But there are certain churches that I would not do joint ventures with because of their positions as affecting what I believe to be fundamental doctrines.
Yeah. So like Mike Kleitz asked, would you separate, going back to Calvinism, would you separate over hyper-Calvinism?
Yeah, you'd have to define hyper-Calvinism, though. Okay, so we laughed about it a moment
Okay,
ago.
let me say this before you continue. Like I remember hearing specifically, and man, I wish I could find it. A very popular Bible teacher, and since I can't find the audio, I won't say the name. Who teaches that God created some to glorify Him through salvation, and there are others that He created to glorify Him through damnation in hell. That the purpose they were created was to glorify God through their damnation in hell. That is, I really struggle with that.
Yeah, I would have a problem. I would have a problem with that, and I would have a problem being able to obviously have any kind of a joint venture, let alone. Yeah, I would have a problem with that. You know.
Yeah, they're not. Nobody that believes that is going to preach in our church.
Yeah. But you could say like soteriology as a whole, because you've got this hyper Calvinism and stuff, but you've also got, even among our circles, this easy believism that is dangerous in its own right, right?
Define easy believism.
You know,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to get into specifics.
no, you're fine. Like stories where you hear like, oh, I'm going to approach a bunch of guys on a basketball court in some inner city situation. These are stories I've heard. And I'm just going to go up and say, you want to go to heaven? Yes. Well, pray this prayer. You pray, and you say, well, we praise God. We just had 9 young men got saved.
Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah. We jump, I think because of our heritage within the independent fundamental Baptist movement, we jump to the word separation, where sometimes we might want to jump to the word teaching, where we might want to pull a guy aside like that and say, hey, let's spend some time actually walking you through why this might not be the most helpful thing when it comes to trying to lead people to understanding the gospel. And I know you're saying, well, what if you can't teach them? I've experienced that. That's the reason I say that. I've experienced that type of thing. People coming through our church that have been trained in these type of evangelistic styles. And you know, you kind of have to smirk until you realize how bad off it is for the individual trying to hear this misunderstanding of the gospel. So what we have done is we've attempted to disciple them in a way that they've never been discipled, and not necessarily immediately separate from them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out. I feel obligated. You guys both know Pastor Mark Ward from Tipton. I mentioned him just a moment ago. He's listening now. He says, I'm listening now with Pastor Reese, Josh Teis, Ryan Hayden. Great podcast. Well, he texted me today, and I got to give him a hard time. He says, why don't you ever invite me? And he was just whining a little bit. So I said, you know, what do you...
That sounds like Mark Ward, yeah.
So I was like, you know, what can I straighten these guys out about? And he gave me a whole list of things where I can straighten you guys out. But anyway, so shout out to Mark Ward. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tweeting out about it. So let me throw out another one on this that I was, and it's actually one of Matt Lyon's. And I keep seeing him popping in and out, and I feel bad because I want him in here. But he added this to our list, that sometimes we can become separated from just because of who we fellowship with. Like other people we choose to fellowship with that are on somebody else's danger list, you know. So like Josh mentioned direction. So this person, they're really concerned about their direction, and just because I haven't chosen to break fellowship with that person, they're gonna, you know, break fellowship with me. So
yes, this is second and third and fourth and fifth degree separation.
Yeah.
Which is something that I've been luckily a part of. But no, this is something that is an interesting thing, because we don't want to sully our reputation by spending any kind of time or retweeting or mentioning that we know a certain individual who might be absolutely fundamental and even claim to be independent fundamental Baptist by associating with them at all. I don't know. What do you think, Ryan? Do you think there's validity in this?
In second, third, fourth degree separation?
Sure.
I think it's dangerous. I think it pushes people, like, you know, I don't know. The way I see it is, you know, obviously there's a danger to the left of us, but I think being constantly pushed in the you know, to be more conservative, I think at some point you stop being more conservative and you just move over into the wacko category. And I think the second and third degree separation, that idea has sort of spawned that more than anything. You you just sort of isolate yourself from everybody, and then I don't know.
Yeah. I hear all that noises, and my first thought was Mark Ward's texting you guys, isn't he?
He is.
And then I started getting mine, so he is quite the texter. But I want to share too. Trent Cornwell, he's down at Vision Baptist in Alpharetta with Austin Gardner. He says, "I'm out. You guys are a bunch of carnal goats." Then he says, JK, he's just kidding. But he says, my 63-year-old father-in-law, who has pastored 37 years, is greatly enjoying this. So appreciate that comment as well. So, Trent, appreciate that.
His father-in-law actually married me and my wife. He's
really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
My wife grew up in that church.
Cool.
Can I just say something about Ryden Hayden? He knows everybody on earth. It seems like he has a connection to everybody. I seem to know nobody, especially up in the Midwest. All of you folks, man, I'm just glad to have a chance to get to know some of you.
Yeah, for me, I didn't know anybody either until I started this little podcast, and then I started to get to know everybody. So I'm grateful for that. So, and people who come from like various backgrounds, like people who I never would have fellowshipped any other way. I'm telling you, online, you just get this opportunity to meet people. It's just, I think it's so cool.
Yeah.
All right, so let's kind of, when it comes to this litmus test, let's try to bring this area to a close and kind of move on a little bit. But this list, what about this? And I'm going to go there. What about, we talked about soteriology. I'm trying to spit it out, but I'm like, how am I going to say this? What about bibliology? Okay, is that something we separate over? And to what extent, how far can someone go from a fundamental perspective on that, and we choose to not, co-labor with them in certain aspects? Yes, I'm talking about like Bible version.
Yes, you can say it, King James. I'm a TR guy, so that's the perspective I take. I think it has the best arguments, so that's where I stand. But I have friends, and at this point in my life, I actually have as many friends on one side as I do the other. That
says a lot about your direction.
It does. You have no idea, but that's what I hear from a lot of people. But I do. I have individuals. So the same type of people that you and I would read in our library, and many people that would hear this podcast, you read in your library constantly, I also happen to fellowship with.
Yeah.
And but even though I can retain my perspective and I can retain my doctrinal position, and be respected in my position, and retain fellowship with these other individuals, I can do that. So that's where I'm at on it. Do I separate from them ecclesiastically? I would have somebody personally, and I understand why many would not, but I would have somebody in our pulpit that might hold a different position. But I would not necessarily. Those that have preached from the King James version within our church.
Okay, yeah.
But if somebody has a different perspective on that, I wouldn't ban them from our pulpit personally.
I'm in the same place that Josh is at. I'm a TR guy. I think, why am I a TR guy? I think the best argument is for the TR. Textus Receptus. I just think it's crazy that it took, a couple of theological liberals in the late 1800s to get, the best Bible. These manuscripts that were basically non-existent before that. People before that time, the late 1800s, didn't have a Bible. But I think, as a TR guy, I think it's just as crazy that it took, some moonbats, and I think it's almost being nice, in the late 1900s, 1980s, 1990s, to give us correct bibliology. I think Ruckmanism and, Ripplingerism or whatever is just as dangerous as these modern versions.
I agree. I agree with that statement.
It was non-existent in fundamentalism before basically the 1990s, late 80s, early 90s. John R. Rice was very strong when that stuff first started to come out. I guess he died in the early 80s. So But he came on strong against that, and he was not a King James only guy. And so at one point in fundamentalism, this was not as uncomfortable a topic to talk about as it is now. In our church, we only use the King James, but I've had people, from kind of like a Bob Jones perspective come in that I knew used other versions, and I've just told them, in our church we're King James only. We have people in our church that come from that perspective, and we've had conversations about it. I'm not going to berate them from the pulpit, but when they teach Sunday school or whatever, they're going to use the King James, and but I'm not separating from people over that. I think it's the best arguments for King James onlyism, for the TR onlyism, are extra biblical, they're historical, and I'm not going to separate from somebody over an extra biblical issue. Does that make sense?
I love the way you phrase that. I agree exactly with what you're saying there. I think it is historical. I think there's a faith element to it, but it is something that has to become a position that has to become that is come to by faith. And so if it takes some time to study the history, if it takes some time to come to that faith, I think we need to give grace to individuals. And look, I'm comfortable with the fact that I have the position I have. I'm comfortable with the fact that I feel like it's a historical position. And those who are gracious on the other side, those who are kind on the other side, have no problem with the fact that I have that position. And they welcome me as a friend and co-laborer in the harvest field. And so I offer them the exact same courtesy. I don't believe it's a division issue.
Yeah, I'm with you. One other thing, there's a passage in the end of the book of James that I'm really big on, James 3:13-18, where it talks about who is wise and endued with knowledge among you, and it gives this checklist. I kind of consider it a rubric for experts that we're supposed to be listening to, spiritual experts that we're supposed to be listening to. And I have not found anybody that takes the extreme King James position, any kind of teacher, that comes anywhere close to qualifying on that checklist. You talk about people that are very crass and harsh and rude and don't show any grace towards people that disagree with them. Honestly, I find more people that are not King James only folks, mainstream evangelical teachers, to be kinder in that area, in that respect than some of the hardcore KJV only people. But yeah. I'm comfortable in my position there. I mean, I've contemplated going to King James conferences, the Dean Bergen Society, stuff like that. I'm not going anywhere there. I mean, that's where I'm at. So
yeah. So I've been quiet here for a moment. I've been trying to bring Matt Lyon into the conversation. I've actually got him on the phone, and I'm going to turn his audio up. So Matt, are you there? Matt? Oh, he hung up. That's all right. I'm gonna call him back. He was like, "What is this guy doing?" Because I haven't. Let's ring him up here. You guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep. We're gonna ring him up.
Hello?
Hello, Matt. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Are you keeping up with the conversation here?
I'm trying to. I'm like an old school fun, not be able to figure out the technology.
Matt Lyons is finally here. We're glad to see you.
So what thoughts have you had that maybe you can share with us? I don't know how long we'll keep the phone, see how it works, but we can all hear you. So I don't know if you can hear. You may only be able to hear me. So go ahead and share some of your thoughts.
Well, you start talking about John R. Rice. I mean, I think he's the best example we've got for fundamentalism that's going to work in the future. And he's very clear. You're talking about the King James issue and separation. On the one hand, he was more separated than any of us are. Talking about movies and dress standards. But on the other hand, he was not King James only. And you look at even someone like Lee Robertson. Not only was he not King James only, but he told the New King James Committee that they could work on the campus of Tennessee Temple to translate the New King James. So this is our heritage. This is where we're coming from. And if we choose to reject that and move in a new direction, I think it's a big risk we're taking.
That's why I think it's important to go with old paths. Follow John R., right?
You went there first.
So
Actually, I know what that hashtag is, but I don't know any of those people, so I guess I can joke without any problems.
yeah. So I think Matt can only hear me. So just so you guys know, but I'm going to go ahead and ask Matt. Matt, while you're on the line, a little bit more on the John R. Rice direction. You brought up a couple of his books. I'm a Fundamentalist and Our God-Breathed Book that the Sword won't publish anymore. I mean, what's going on with that, and what? Just elaborate a little bit more on John R. Rice and just historic American fundamentalism and where it's come from to where it is today.
Yeah, I think so. Our God-breathed book was John R. Rice's kind of manifesto on what he believes on the Bible, on inspiration. He's got a chapter on versions, things like that. And then his book on I'm a Fundamentalist is kind of a blueprint for a moderate fundamentalism. And he's known in history circles as a moderate fundamentalist. And you can trace, this is my opinion in studying it, you can trace the change in fundamentalism to the year he died. He died in 1980. Lee Robertson retired in 81. And if you look at fundamentalism, the past 30 years have been different than the previous.
Yeah.
So I think when he was a leader, he kept us on a moderate path that was separated, that was fundamental, that was evangelistic. But like he says in one of his chapters, be a fundamentalist, but don't be a nut. And when he died, I think people forgot about that chapter.
Yeah. So Matt, before I let you go, and I apologize we couldn't get the tech figured out. We'll have to practice next time. So, but let me ask you this: you kind of added some to the conversation as we were preparing on this subject of a confessional approach. Do you think we should kind of maybe recover or bring back a more confessional approach to our theology and our ecclesiology? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my field is Baptist history, and so I'm old paths. I'm talking 1609 old paths, and traditionally and historically, Baptists have been confessional. From 1611, Thomas Helwys puts out the first Baptist confession, the 1689 confession, which is still used today. J. Frank Norris used the New Hampshire Confession. So this is our heritage, even among independent Baptists, of using confessions to tell people this is where we stand, this is what we believe. I think it's all part of being ready to give an answer to everyone that asks if the hope is within you. And you're not ready to give the answer until you put it down on paper, work through it, looked at what other people have done. And if we refuse to do that, we're really taking the path that the liberals took in the 20s, where they refused to take a confession so that they weren't pinned down on any sort of doctrine. Mm-hmm. Fundamentalists withdrew from the Northern Baptist Association, became independent Baptists because they wanted to have a confession.
Yeah.
And that's our heritage, and I think we should go back to it. Put down on paper where we stand. Go out there, be bold, be thorough with our doctrine, and not be afraid of writing it down and then publishing it and talking about it.
Yeah. So are you suggesting we author something new, pen something new, or base it off something else? And if so, like, who are you nominating to write this confession?
Yeah.
If you look at the guys that made the confessions prior to us, I don't think we match up to that. So I don't see any reason to start from scratch. You start with what's been put down, and sure, we're going to disagree with some things, but for the most part, we're independent, we're Baptists, we're fundamental Baptists, and because we see a tradition there, we see a history of it. So you grab, the New Hampshire Confession, which is what J. Frank Norris used, and John R. Rice would have used that. You grab the Southern Baptist Confession, and you look at it, you look at the GARBC Confession, you take them, you sit down with a group of guys, whether it be your church staff or pastor's fellowship, and you say, here's what we believe, here's what we agree on, and here's what we want people to know that we believe. So I think there's plenty of history and plenty of resources that we can draw from.
Yeah. Well, Matt, man, I'm going to let you go off of here, and I appreciate your input. And if you want to jump on Twitter and keep in the conversation through that, I'm going to keep up with that Twitter stream. So feel free to join in there. But yeah, let's practice next time, and we'll get this thing down so you can be with us the whole time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Talk to you later. All right. So, guys, thoughts, responses to what Matt had to say.
I would say that, I mean, that sounds great. The problem is we're not within an organized denomination, really. So when you ask the question, who would write that, he's right. Confessional would be a wonderful thing, but who writes it, and then who falls in line and follows it? We're independent Baptists for a reason. Part of the thing that is in our very blood is the fact that we're independent of everyone. And because we are independent of everyone, we're not going to sign on somebody else's confessional. So the question would be, how exactly does that go about unless you actually had an organized convention like the SBC or an organized denomination, Baptist denomination? So it's good in theory, but as I see the independent Baptists, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Except for each individual local church. And
Right.
I think each individual church has that. They have a statement of faith, right?
Yeah, so his suggestion is let's agree to something together that we can unite on that is kind of going to give us the guidelines that if you meet this, you're our brother, and we're co-laborers together. And if you do not, then then we don't. So do you? I mean, let's go to Ryan. Ryan, what do you think? Do you think a return to confessional, our confessional history would be a good move?
I don't know. I don't know that it's possible. I think I'm with Josh there. I mean, I would reject the idea of some group of churches trying to impose a confession on my church. And I think every independent Baptist pastor I know probably feels the same way. So I think it would have to be very organic, each individual church coming up with their own confession. I do think it's wise to look at them and to have some kind of, published statement of faith that maybe be based upon some of these confessions, because I think the guys that wrote those were very wise, and I also think it's a good thing to look at them just to see where we were as Baptists, 300 years ago or 250 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and plus, I mean, it's the only time that people ever talk about New Hampshire, so I'm cool with that.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark Ward chiming in too. He says we should write our own confession of faith. I don't know if he's talking about as a whole, as a group, or more like an individual church-based thing. But I'm wondering if it's kind of what you look at other places that are not like, I don't know, organized denominations, but they adopt. You see that we as a church hold to the such and such confession. It doesn't mean that I don't know how I'm trying to put this. It doesn't mean that you're all adopting it over like a balloon over your entire group of churches. You're still autonomous, but as an identifier, I think is what he's saying. And I'm not sure what I think about that, because I've also been one who, when I think about discipling and raising my kids, that has been really slow to consider what Ryan, you as a homeschool family, a lot of the homeschool community catechizes their kids. I mean, they have them memorize the statements, the verses, and all that stuff, and answer all the questions. And I don't want to turn my children's faith or my own into something that's just a memorized list. I want it to be organic. I want it to be real, and not so.
Yeah, I mean, I catechize my kids. I think it's great. I went to a Christian school, and we had catechism in my Baptist Christian school.
It's because you're from New Hampshire.
No, actually, this was in Virginia.
Never mind.
So, yeah. But I can see what you're saying, though.
Looks like we lost Josh.
Yeah.
So, he just got bored with us. So I know we didn't get a chance to chat on the.
Hey, I think I lost you guys for a minute.
I see you. we lost you, but you're back.
Oh, I'm back.
So we didn't get a chance to talk historically. Was our fundamentalist roots much more broad? Was the tent bigger than it is now?
I got cut out when Ryan was expressing the fact that he was a Catholic.
What?
Oh.
And I'm just
the
kidding.
first person that called him that.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Were we more broad? Was the tent bigger?
Yeah. Was it historically? Or do?
Yeah, I think we need Matthew back for that. He's the expert in Baptist history. From my understanding, from my experience, I think the answer is yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm with Matt. I mean, I've read a lot. I've spent a lot of time in libraries finding everything that's ever been written that I could find about it, and talked to a lot of people. I'm not an expert. I'm not a PhD student like he is, but I think he's right. Something happened about 30 years ago, and it's a vastly different movement than when it was for its first 30 years than it has been the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And I personally don't think it's a positive thing.
So what do you think it is that changed it? 35 years ago, and I agree with that estimate. What do you think happened?
Okay, so you had the influence of John R. Rice, and that went away.
Yep.
He was kind of a calming influence. I think you had a group of the first generation of independent Baptists was dying off. And the first generation of independent Baptists didn't start off as independent Baptists. They started off in the SBC. They started off in the Northern Baptist Convention. And so they had a wider, broader perspective than the second generation of independent Baptists did. So I think that took play. And I think, people will hate me for this, but I think Jack Hyles in particular probably led a lot of people towards, his own brand of fundamentalism, which I don't think was a positive thing. And then there was the reaction to what Falwell was doing. I think people tried to move and distance themselves from him in the early 80s, mid 80s, 90s, whenever that took place.
Yeah.
So that's my perspective, and I think all of that together, made what we have today.
Yeah.
So today, let's kind of bring this toward a positive end. And when you're looking for people not who you're looking to separate from, but when you're looking for guys who you want to join yourself to, when you're looking for people to minister alongside of, and brothers who you're going to connect with and really encourage one another, when you're looking for people who you really want in that tight circle of fellowship, let me ask you this now: what are you looking for?
I've got three things that in particular.
Go.
Obviously, the first place I'm going to look is among my fellow independent Baptists. But the three things that I kind of make as a sort of mark of fellowship for me, people that I want to have something to do with, are number one, people that respect they try their best to properly interpret the Bible and preach the Bible as it was given. So people that study and try to interpret the Bible in context, whether they consider themselves expository preachers or not. I'm not interested in hearing some guy's opinion on half of one verse completely ripped from its context. And I think that eliminates a lot of people for me that are independent Baptists that I'm not going to have much to do with. The second thing I look for people that seem like they're trying to have the Spirit of Christ. They're trying to represent the gracious, loving, and holy character of God, and that's their standard. They haven't, they don't make excuses for themselves to be mean and nasty to people. And then the third thing I'm looking for is people that are trying to reach their community and love people where they're at and reach all kinds of people, not just people like them. So that's my three.
Yeah.
How about you, Josh?
Yeah, I have three too. I just wrote them down. I would begin with love. I would want to be with people who genuinely show love to God and show love to others. And that wasn't original with me. But I think if I want to be in fellowship with somebody, Is their ministry, is their life, and is their person characterized by love?
Yeah.
And I know that seems, oh, well, of course, but, is it? For me, honestly, genuinely, that would be easier for me to separate from if they were not. Number two, a non-critical spirit is important for me.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
I just can't spend a lot of time with people who are constantly railing on both sides. So you want to talk about separation? I can't spend a lot of time with people who are railing against the liberals. These liberals out there, I can't. It's just not in me. And I can't spend a lot of time with guys who are railing against the legalists. These legalists and all their standards. Both of these groups just are so critical of everyone other than who they are. Very pharisaical on both sides. And I know I'm being critical. Some are thinking by even saying that. I'm just saying, look, I just want to separate myself from that because I know my own heart. And my own heart seems to be filled with pride and critical. And when I'm around critical people, it tends to come out. So I like to stay away from I like to be with people who are loving God, loving others, non-critical spirit. And then I would lastly put fundamental in doctrine. And those who are following the fundamentals of the faith, 1910, I like to have fellowship with those.
Yeah. I was thinking too, like, in the same line, when you look for those people that you're going to fellowship with, and as I mentioned, those people sometimes are all over the country and sometimes all over the world. So my question is, okay, if we're looking at all these reasons to separate, what are the purposes for which we're wanting to unite? So when we're looking for fellowship, what are the reasons why we're uniting with these people? Are we really building these relationships in order to promote evangelism and the establishment of local churches? Are we doing it just for encouragement and fellowship among each other, iron sharpening iron? Are we, like I know some of you have participated, are we using these relationships to help educate one another through like idea days and conferences to where we can come and share our experience and knowledge with others? Why are we building these relationships? What are the purposes of fellowship? We see all the purposes for which people use to separate, but why are we coming together? And why aren't we focusing on that more than we are on separation? So what do you guys think? Why, if we're looking for people to come together and join into fellowship and relationship with that are other ministers of the gospel, for what purpose are we doing that? And are we accomplishing a purpose? Or are we just looking for friends? I mean, because to me that's there's nothing wrong with that.
I need friends. I'm going to say it right now. I just need friends. Be my friend. That's all. Ryan, go ahead.
I mean, is there anything wrong with just wanting friends? I mean, wanting. I'm going to fellowship with these people for the rest of eternity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's part of heaven, that we're going to be together. These people that we have the same goals, we have the same mission in life, and we believe the same things. I try in our church, we're just a little church in a little town, and we got a bunch of other independent Baptists in our area. We pray for them every week in our church services by name. We pick a different church in our area and pray for them. I've had every pastor, independent Baptist pastor in my area within a couple hours preach in my church since I've been here the last 3 years. And my main reason for doing it, one, I want to be their friend and I want to help them as much as I can, and I want just to enjoy that fellowship. But I want the people in my church to know that what God is doing is bigger than us, and I want them to not just kind of have this like bunker mentality where it's just us versus everybody in the world. And I think that's something that sort of happens naturally, and you have to fight against it on purpose. And so I hope that answered their question.
Yeah. Well, it is probably time to bring this thing to a close. So we're going to kind of take it around and give any closing comments, and let everybody know again one more time where they can connect with you. All right, so let's go to Josh. Closing comments and just where people can connect with you.
You can connect with me. This is Josh Teis. You can connect with me next time you're on vacation in Las Vegas. And you can come by our church.
Where are you located compared to Caesar's Palace? Just so I know.
Yeah, right.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I saw you there, Ryan. No. Next time you're in Las Vegas, you can come and visit us seriously, and you can connect with me online at Twitter, Josh Teis, Facebook, Joshua Teis, and we'd love to get to know you.
All right, Ryan.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. Thanks for having me on again, Brian.
Yeah.
You can connect with me at RYN Hayden on Twitter. You can look me up on Facebook, Ryan Hayden, and you can check out my blog, PastorRyanHayden.com.
All right, and you guys can
Ryan,
go ahead.
Let me say this. Also, you can come to one of our idea days. We have one out here in Las Vegas in January, and we're going to be having one up in the Northeast, yet to confirm, and then one down in the South, yet to confirm.
I think we're trying to get you to the Midwest too, but you're too good for the Midwest.
No, that's terrible. That's not true.
Too flat and boring here. No.
I'd love to, but yeah, we're trying to get it more regionally located, so people can make it.
Yeah, that'd be good. Well, I'll close things out by letting you know you can connect with me. You can see it right here at Pastor Reese on Twitter. And go over there. I love interacting with folks and connecting with folks there. You can sign up. This is one thing I don't push that much, but I should more, is our mailing list. And you can sign up for that by going to ministryconnectionpodcast.com/list. And anytime a new episode of the podcast comes out, anytime I'm looking for feedback, anytime just I've got interviews coming up, sometimes I want to know what you want me to ask folks. And so I'll send an email out. And so join that email list and connect with us there. And I just want to give a shout out too. The reason why these things are even possible and why I do what I do is because there are people out there who make it possible, people who support the podcast, and on a per episode basis. And Josh is one of those folks. I appreciate him doing that. Josh, why should people support the Ministry Connection podcast?
Well, if in my opinion, if you're going to listen to it and enjoy it every week like I do, you might as well throw a few bucks to it every week. That's why I do it. And by the way, the reason I'm on today is obviously because I'm a supporter. That's why Brian invited me. So you might actually be able to get on one of the podcasts.
Bologna, but no, that's good, and that is why. And so, I'm just kidding. But yeah, go over to ministryconnectionpodcast.com/support. You can sign up for a really as low as you want, but there's $1, $2, $3, $5, $10, whatever you can do per episode, and I'm telling you, that's what makes these things possible. That's what helps me, dedicate the time to making these episodes available to you. And so yeah, go do that. And we're going to close out with the same statement that we always do, and I want to encourage everybody out there that until we connect next time, keep serving Jesus.